thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, congratulations on writing a book. That is no small feat. What's harder, getting a movie made or publishing a book that you wrote?
Well, writing a book is a lot easier than writing well, let me just say this. Writing a book, all you need is a computer, right? I mean, when you write a movie, if you write too big a scene, someone's going to be like, we can't give you that much money for that. And inevitably, there's so many movies that I've written that never get made. But with a book, you're like, I'll write it whatever I want to, you know. And it's
how many movies have you written that haven't gotten made, or how many movies have you written and how many have gotten made?
I mean, I've written 8 that have gotten made, and I've written probably another, almost 20. Right? I mean, there's so many scripts around town that you're like, oh, not quite right, or the actor didn't jump on, or.
And is it fair to say that the 8 that you got made, every time one of them got made, it still felt like a miracle?
Yeah, making a movie it's a miracle because it costs millions and millions of dollars to do it. I mean, if you're painting a picture, you just go buy an easel and paint it, or you write a book, you can just write a book. But, you know, making a movie requires, like, writing something that you think will be commercial, but not just commercial enough to make them not just like a little profit, but a massive profit. And then you have to attract stars, which, you know, can take, you know, months and months, whether their schedule is open or not, and then they're, you know, whether the studio wants to make that kind of movie or they have a movie like that, or there's so many things that go into it.
So what made you sit down and start writing this?
You know, I got a lot of questions from people who think that I'm from Canada. And they, you know, people constantly are like, "Are you from Canada?" I'm like, "No, I'm not from Canada. I'm going to write a book to show you where I'm really from."
So this book was simply to just clear the air.
I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being told I'm from Canada.
Your entire biography just to basically get to the point
of
I'm not from Canada.
That's right. I'm from Chicago, as you'll read in the book. All right? I've been to Canada, but I'm not from there. I think there's a guy who looks exactly like me in Canada, and well, now you know. Now the world will know.
Well, the Midwestern accent is slightly Canadian, you know? There's an Ontario-ishness to a Chicago accent.
Yeah. Can you hear my Chicago accent?
A little bit.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Badge of honor, I see?
Yeah.
Where is it, badge of honor?
Very much.
I love the stuff in here about you in high school, at a boarding school, learning about, basically, I mean, you're a narc in the first chapter that turns afterwards into someone who really loves getting high.
Yeah, I do love getting high, and
to this day.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I do. But you know, when I started drinking probably, you know, fairly. I got drunk for the first time in 5th grade, and it was, you know, I got all my friends together in my basement, and we poured like about an inch of every single bottle of alcohol into a tennis pitcher full of ice. And then we shook it up and walked around the neighborhood and drank it. And
in this face,
yeah. And I got unbelievably obliterated. And it was like a Thursday night in the summer, and my friends had to go home because we were 10, right? And so they rang the doorbell, and my mom answered the door, and I remember moments of the rest of the night because mostly I was just throwing up. But I mean, it was you know, and then I stopped drinking for 2 years till 8th grade, but even when I went to high school, I was a freshman in high school. I drank, but I was very anti-drug. I was anti-smoking and all anti-drug. And I was in a prep school, and the rule of the school was if you get caught drinking or doing any drugs, you're kicked out. 1 shot, you're out. That's it. And they said, and I was a boarding student. If your roommate has drugs and you don't tell on them, you're kicked out. Guilt by association, which was probably not true, but that was the rule, right? So my freshman year, I had a Japanese foreign exchange student for a roommate, and he didn't speak a word of English, right? And I was like, well, this is not exactly what I expected to have happen when I went to high school. I was kind of hoping for like a John Hughes experience, right? But I was like, you know, in a
it's the 16 Candles experience.
Yeah, in a way, I was rooming with Long Duck Dong, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it was, in a way, I was, right? And I want to be clear, like, I wasn't anti-Japanese, right? I had like there was a Japanese girl who I dated for years in grade school, but this guy, he got unlucky when he got me as a roommate, because I was like, I don't know, Japanese kid. We didn't say a word to each other. And then he got a boil on his face, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a boil. Like, it just, he really drew a bad card with me. And then one day, I came back to my room, and, well, let me tell you one more story before this. So I was in my room, and I was 13, right? So I was in the throes of what I would say was a bit of a masturbation addiction, right? Like, I was like...
13's about right.
Yeah, right?
That's about right.
I was jerking off so much my dick started to look like an hourglass. Like, it was like thin in the middle and big on the top and big on the bottom, right? So, but at 13, you don't admit it, right? So you don't tell anybody, that nobody jerks off. No, absolutely never, right? And I was in my room, jerking off, and these guys knocked on the door, and I froze. It was like a little afternoon jerk. And I froze, and they're like, "You're jerking off in there!" And I just didn't say a word. They're like, "We could hear you!" And I just sort of froze, and they went away. And then I started going again, and then they came back slamming on the door. And later that evening at study hall, I walked into my friend's room, and it was the two guys who had been knocking, his roommates had been knocking on my door. And they're like, "You were jerking off, we know it." I'm like, "No, I wasn't." And I remember being furious about this. I'm like, how dare they walk around telling people I was jerking off, right? And so then about 3 weeks later, I'm having trouble with my roommate, and I don't like these guys. And I go back to my room, and the door's locked. And stuffed under the door is a towel. I can see it, right? And I'm like, I smell something, but I've never smelled marijuana before. So I don't really know. I'm like, could be. I don't know. I don't know. But they wouldn't let me in. Nobody would let me in. So I went to my friend's room, and about a half an hour later, they walk out. There's like smoke coming out. And I'm like, okay. And it's the two guys who busted me jerking off and my Japanese roommate.
The boil kid.
The kid with the boil. And I was like, interesting. And so I decided that I was going to tell on them, right? And my rationale was, well, if my roommate has pot and I don't tell on him, then I'm going to get kicked out. I knew that wasn't true, but I went to like a guy called the prefect. He was like a senior in like sort of in charge of, he was like a student leader. And I said, these guys were smoking pot in my room, so,
Better kick them out.
I said, I don't want to get kicked out, so, and the guy said, okay, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And I was like, what do you mean you'll take care of it? And he goes, I'll give them a warning. And I was like, oh no, now they're going to know that I narked on him. So I went over the prefect's head and I went to the assistant headmaster and I said, look, I'm really worried about getting kicked out of school. These guys were smoking pot in my room. I don't smoke pot. I just am worried. And within 45 minutes, they were kicked out of school.
Now, I'm gonna jump ahead really fast. Do you think the brain that was pulling those maneuvers and being somewhat Machiavellian for like an 8th or 9th grader
Brutal.
helped make you successful later on in show business?
You have to be an operator in show business
That's what I
really
mean.
make it. I mean, you really have to like pull a lot of levers.
You also have to be very good at convincing yourself you're doing one thing when you might be doing it for a different reason.
I suppose. I mean, I think, let me just say this. I shouldn't have told on these guys, all right? I mean, because after they got kicked out, about a year later, a friend of mine was like, hey, we're going to go out in the woods and smoke a joint. And he goes, do you want to go? And I'm like, what's it like? And he told me, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I did tell on those guys for doing it. And I went, and I smoked, and I loved it. And I loved it. And then I became like a full-time smoker, and then I got into cocaine, and I was like a full-time drug user. And then my junior year, I was going back from Chicago to my school, and I'm walking down the train, and I look up, and it's my Japanese roommate walking towards me.
Still have the boil or no?
No, but he's got a crew cut from the military school that I had sent him to, basically. And I was like, oh no. And of course, look, it's the 80s and it's whatever, but I was like, does he know martial arts, right? I didn't know. And so, and we're walking towards each other on this fucking train, and I'm like, oh man. I said to him, look, man, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And he still hasn't learned much English, right? So he goes, I so sorry. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. He goes, I sorry. And I said, no, 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 no. I smoke pot. I smoke pot. He goes, no pot. I said, no, no, I snort coke. He goes, no, like this. And then he gets down on his knees, and he puts his hands on my feet and bows all the way down, head to the ground. And I'm like, this is not the apology. This is lost in translation, this whole damn thing. And he gets up, and he goes, so sorry, and he walks away. And I'm like, wow, that was an unsatisfying apology for me.
Did you ever bump into the other two kids or ever hear about what was happening to the other two kids?
I never heard about the other two kids. Their older brothers, though, made a plan to kick my ass. And it was the day before they were graduating from high school. And by this time, I was like an official druggie. I mean, I was doing everything you could imagine. I was doing it all. And so now I'm like, yeah, you could kick my ass, but I mean, I'm one of you guys now. I mean, it became a whole thing. Like they were going to kick my ass after the school dance. And my sister who had graduated, I'd heard about the plot to kick my ass. And so she called her friends who were like linemen on the football team, and they showed up at my dorm, and they're like, Sandy sent us. And I was like, okay. And so now I have these two bodyguards, and we're at the dance, and we're all looking at each other across the dance. And I don't know when it was going to happen, but then the assistant headmaster grabbed me, my bodyguards, and those two guys and took us to his office, and he said, if you guys do anything, you're being kicked out. They were supposed to graduate the next day. And so then it was just done. It was just done.
Have you ever thought about writing a movie called The Plot to Kick My Ass? It's a really
No, but I like that title.
That just reminds me immediately of just being in high school and hearing all the time, like, they're planning to kick his ass,
Yeah.
or like there was always plans to do
Right.
something that never
right.
came to fruition. Now, when you leave school and you're in Chicago, and you're hanging out with Chris Farley, you're hanging out with these incredible Chicago comedians at the time. You're still getting fucked up. You have this great passage though about sort of knowing the power of drugs, and drugs can be wonderful and they can be great, but the smartest thing to do with drugs is to be very aware of their power.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to one of the original Saturday Night Live people talk about cocaine on Saturday Night Live, and he goes, yeah, we were all kind of doing it, but we didn't know that it was as addictive as it was. We knew we liked it, we knew we wanted more, but there wasn't this culture of addiction and rehabilitation. There was just excessive use. And so when we came up, we were aware of drug addiction, and we were aware of alcohol addiction, and so we looked at it with a different view. We were like, we did it, and we're like, does this mean I'm addicted? And you're like, no, not really, okay. But look, I mean, I've met people, I've had a number of friends, not a ton, but some have been addicted. And they went through rehab, and they survived, and I had a friend who didn't survive. So it can be a dangerous thing, and I would think the majority of people try some drug, right? And knowing about it, knowing that there can be dangerous is probably an important, at least it was good for me. I don't have this addictive gene, I guess. I don't know. I can do it and stop and not do it. And
Same, but I had that thing as well when experimentation started, whereas as much as I wanted to experiment and I was totally game and open to like anything, I was also always very fearful of like the next day or doing it 2 days later. Am I doing it too much? Maybe it's time to stop. Or you'd get around someone who looked like they were doing it too much, and you'd be like, oh, I don't want to be in this crew. That's the crew that's doing it too much.
Right. That was my crew. That was my crew. Yeah. But
possibly mine too.
But I don't. I was always sort of anti the legal drugs, like the opioids and the pain pills, because that stuff kills you. I mean, that stuff really does kill you, and heroin and those things. Like I'm
it's like real addiction, whether you have the gene or not.
Yeah,
you
and
can just get ripped in.
It can just take you.
So talk about the period of time after you make your first film for like $25,000-$30,000, right? And then you're trying to make Super Troopers, and the time it takes to get this movie made, because it's a wonderful lesson, I think, in how difficult independent filmmaking is, and how much ambition and strength it takes to sort of follow through.
Well, we were always trying to be the American Monty Python. That was our goal. Like they had 5 guys, and they wrote their own movies, and they were in them. And so we made this film, Puddle Cruiser, which is like a college love story kind of thing, that happened. Like when I was in college, I started dating a girl who had a boyfriend at another school. And she and I were kind of casually dating and whatever. And eventually she broke up with him and started dating me. And she said, you know, Anthony is pretty pissed off at you. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. And she said, yeah, but he said he wanted to kick your ass. And I was like,
Plot to kick your ass, continue.
yeah, the plot to kick my ass. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And she goes, no big deal, but he's kind of a big guy. And I'm like, what are you saying? You think your old boyfriend can kick my ass? She goes, I mean, he played football. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I joined the rugby team to show her that I was as tough as this guy. This guy was also on his school's rugby team, and there was a game scheduled for the two teams. And I was like, oh, I'm actually going to have to fight this guy, right? But he didn't know I was on that team, and he didn't end up showing up to that game. But I got into a couple of scrapes with his teammates who had no idea who I was either. They just knew this random Indian guy was trying to fight him. And so we wrote a movie sort of about that kind of plot. And we made it, shot it at Colgate where we went to school, and we took it to Sundance. And the film was a real hit at Sundance. Like big, huge crowds and big laughter, and everyone's like, who are these guys? And it came very close to selling, like, 4 or 5 times. Harvey Weinstein almost bought it, then he didn't,
This begins your relationship with Harvey Weinstein, which
Yeah.
is a really great story in the book.
Yeah, I mean, his acquisitions executives tried to get him to buy the movie because they'd seen it with a crowd and they loved it, right? And the problem with buying a movie is that the person who writes the check is the one who's really responsible for spending the money, and they have to see your movie with an audience, and they have to see it. They're not. If they just see it alone in a room, they're not going to buy it because they're like, okay, this seems good. Who knows?
It's really hard to get into a comedy when you're alone in the room. If you put on even my favorite comedy, the most you're going to get from me is a couple chuckles.
Yeah.
If I'm with a few people, we're going to laugh hysterically.
Right, but if you pack a crowd with 400, 500 people, and they're roaring, and then you can go, okay, this is worth buying, right? He kept missing. We kept setting up screenings for him, and he just couldn't make it. He had to have lunch with Gwyneth Paltrow, whatever it was, right? He couldn't quite make it. And in the end, he finally set up a screening and said, I'll be there. And then he showed up just as the credits were rolling. The good news was the screening had went incredibly well. The bad news was it was just down the street, 3rd Street and 2nd Avenue, which was really close to NYU. So this crowd was packed with NYU students. And they were, at the end of the thing, they say, what do you think of the movie? And everyone's like, this is a great movie. It's like college. It's like us. We love it. And then Harvey Weinstein walked in. And one by one, all these film students started looking back at Harvey Weinstein. And suddenly they're all like Pauline Kael, the reviewer, and they're like, I didn't love the framing on this one shot, and the tone was a little off, and they just turned on this movie.
I'm looking for internships.
Yeah, they were. They were all like, oh my God, Harvey Weinstein. And quickly, they turned against us, and it didn't matter how much they'd laugh their ass off, he wasn't going to buy it. He didn't buy it.
One thing that you say at the beginning of the book is you talk about what lots of filmmakers talk about, which is director jail or movie jail, what happens to sometimes. How did that happen to you? When did that happen? Because you say that you were in it at one time.
Well, after Club Dread, after Super Troopers,
really successful.
The movie made Fox Searchlight a lot of money, right? And so they were in a position where, it's that rare moment when you walk into the studio and they say, what do you want to do next? And you could say anything. And they go, okay. And that's what we did. We said, we want to make a movie. We want to make like an Agatha Christie style whodunit, but more of a slasher movie. And we're like the staff at a Snowden ski resort. And one by one, we're being murdered, right? And they were like, well, shooting in the snow is expensive. Can you put it in a nicer, like a warmer climate? So we set it on a desert island, right? And so we were the staff of like a Club Med kind of thing. And one by one were killed. And so they said, sure, let's do it. They have to. If they don't say yes, then you're going to go to the next studio. And they'll be like, oh, we got the Super Troopers guys, right? So they say yes. We started making that movie, and it was in Mexico, and it was in like a really rural part of Mexico. And so the phones literally didn't work. And so we weren't able to communicate with them. You know, we got behind a day, and just things started to go south on that movie. And they started to think we were just wasting their money in Mexico. And, you know, like, so they started to lose confidence. Then we cut the film, and the film has a lot of blood, and it's a comedy, but it's a horror comedy, right? And the opening scene isn't the best, right? And, you know, in Super Troopers, the opening scene was good, but this one we missed it a little bit. And so the movie didn't test that well. And so then they were like, oh, we don't want to put a bunch of money into promoting it. And then still, though, we were about to open up the film. I think it was in February. And I walked into the head of marketing's office. And I said, how are we looking this weekend? She goes, actually pretty good. The only big competition is this movie about Christ, and it's in Aramaic. And she goes, the Mel Gibson movie. And she goes, who's going to see a movie in Aramaic? And I'm like, yeah, right. What a dumb idea. And on Wednesday, they were selling out. On Thursday, they were selling out. On Friday, we were in Midtown, 42nd Street, and we were watching, like, church groups had bought up all the tickets, and when anybody walked into the theater, for any movie, they're like, you want a free ticket? And they're like, okay. They wanted to ensure that Jesus had a sellout, right? And we got crucified.
Wait, I don't get it. Is that?
We just got blown away. And so ultimately, after that, I was in director jail.
What exactly does that feel like? What does that mean?
It means you're like, I have an idea for a film. They're like, no. I mean, they may take the meeting. Right. They might take the meeting. They might not take the meeting. You know, you might not be able to get into pitch.
Is that something that anybody that you're working with makes you aware of, or you feel in the moment, or something looking back on? You're like, oh, I was in director jail.
Nobody tells you you're in jail, but you just can't get they're not going to give you the job because you're the guy who directed that flop, Club Dread. Club Dread has gone on to make them a ton of money, but really what matters to them is the theatrical opening weekend box office. And so they were like, no, because they're thinking, okay, I have this movie. Should I hire the guy who just directed that flop? Or should I hire this guy who just had a hit, whoever that guy is, right?
Or like just, maybe he didn't even have a hit, but he had a movie at Sundance that played well.
Yeah, that could be a newcomer, right? Yeah. And so I was in jail, right? And it was kind of going on. And then I got a call from a friend of mine at Warner Brothers, and he said, hey, we're making the Dukes of Hazzard. Do you want to direct it? And I'm like, I mean, I was a big fan of Dukes of Hazzard when I was in school, grade school, and like I loved that car, and I loved all the stunts, and I loved Daisy Duke's shorts quite a bit, and so I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'll read the script. You know, no one else is sending me anything, so I read the script, and it wasn't good at all. So I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do it. About 2 months go by, and he calls me back, and he goes, you want to read another draft for the Dukes of Hazzard? I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I have to read, so why not, right? Sent it to me. It was not much better. It was a little better. I said, no, I'm not doing it. Another 2 months go by, and he goes, we're sending you another script for the Dukes of Hazzard. I'm like, I'll read it, but I'm not going to do it. And I read it, and it's like, it's a little bit like enough where you're like, okay, there's a structure here, and if we changed every single word, we could make this into a good movie.
Wait, can I ask a question? As someone who's never worked in development in movies, right? An internship at an independent production company where I got to read their scripts, but it's a completely different ballgame with a production company like that. Are there people working for major studios passing around scripts that aren't at the very least passable or readable at times?
Yes.
That's so fucked up to me.
Well, look, the way it works is that what they want you to do is buy into the vision. Is this a movie that should be made? Should we make the Dukes of Hazzard movie? Can you imagine a movie that we can make it? Yeah, okay, you don't like all this stuff, fine. Just make it good then. Just you do it. And what he said was, I want this film to have the Super Troopers vibe. And I said, you know, you're right in a way because, you know, what I told the crew when we made Super Troopers was, if we do it right, it's going to feel like Smokey and the Bandit, right? I want mustaches that big, right? I want cars screeching around. I want macho fights. I want, and I want jokes.
You even had someone that wanted you to make Super Troopers take place in the 70s, right? You had to rewrite it.
Farrelly Brothers said, we might get this movie made for you if you would set it in the 70s. So we wrote a 70s draft. It was called Super Troopers 76, you know? But they ended up not doing it. So, but yeah, it's just, I wanted to have that Burt Reynolds vibe to it, and I said, I'll make this movie, but we got to have a bridge back to the sort of 70s and 80s. I need to hire Burt Reynolds and Willie Nelson, and the executive is like, to play the Duke Boys, and I'm like, no, but I'd see that movie, right? I mean, so.
That would be amazing.
And so, yeah, we ended up getting Burt Reynolds and Willie Nelson play Uncle Jesse and Boss Hogg, and
you and Burt didn't really see eye to eye that often, in the same way that many filmmakers, except for maybe Hal Needham, see eye to eye or don't see eye to eye.
Burt Reynolds is an anti-authority, like that whole anti-authority thing you see in the movies is real, and on the movie set, the director is the authority, right? And so he comes in. And he's eaten a lot of directors alive before. I mean, Burt is like notoriously tough on directors. In fact, when they asked him to be in the movie, he said, "Yeah, I'll play Boss Hogg as long as I can direct the picture." And they're like, "Jay's gonna do the picture," and he's like, "All right, I'll do it." So he came down there, and on the first day, we had like I made the mistake. We scheduled a 5-page dialogue scene for Burt. And he didn't happen to know the lines that day, right?
Of course he didn't.
He didn't know.
I'll make it up. Don't worry.
Well, as he told me, he goes, on Smokey and the Bandit, we had like a 70-page script, and we riffed the rest. I'm like, it's perfect. I mean, what more do you want, right? But this scene had all these like plot details. It had specific setup and jokes, and we improv a little bit, but we don't really just improvise movies. It's not really what we are known for. We're like very specific rhythm and writing, and it is a very crisply written thing.
Yeah, you don't like to burn money.
We don't like to burn money, and I can't stand the idea of like, if we improvise right, it's going to be great. I cannot deal with it. I just need it to be like, if we shoot this, it'll be great, and then improvise some jokes around it, But he was up there sort of riffing, and I'm like, this is not gonna. It's not going to work.
Can I ask what kind of riffs Burt had in the moment? Like what? Because I don't imagine Burt Reynolds to also be like the greatest riffer.
He was. Back
really?
In the Smokey and the Bandit, he was great.
Well, that's true. I interviewed him one time, and he's amazing as a person to interview. He's just, he can pull stories out, and he's got lines like this. But I don't know if he can really sort of.
He couldn't riff. Okay, he couldn't riff, if that's what you're looking for. He would say, like if his line was, he would say to Linda Carter, she walked in and he goes, "Oh, I like your hair." That's the line, right? And he'd go, "I like that chair." What? I like your hair. What? I like your hair. I know. I like it here. And you get into take 12 where I'm standing behind the camera. I like your hair. I like your hair. I like your hair. I like your hair. Go. I like it. I like it. Is that new hair? And you're like, just say it, man. Just fucking say it. And
do you think, is there something sort of broken there when it comes to like listening to authority, or do you think he was fucking with you?
He wasn't fucking with me. He was just, because we'd kind of fight a little bit, and he he punches the air. He's like, and you're like, I know who you're like. I know who you're thinking about, and. He would like get a line right, and then he'd stop and he'd go, "I learned how to act from a young man named Jimmy Stewart. Is that good enough for you, Orson?" He'd call me Orson Welles, and I'm like,
on the set of Dukes of Hazzard, where you like take it down a notch, man.
Yes, it's good enough for me, Burt. I mean, but the guy also tells the best show business stories you ever hear. And he tells them in such a way, he has a method of telling them where he starts the story at full volume and he's progressively gets quieter to the point where he's whispering and your ear is almost touching his. You're just leaning in. I mean, he told me a story about a time he was like in Midtown, like in his heyday when he was the biggest goddamn star on the fucking planet. Like, he told me that all the time. I'm like, yeah, you are. And he's like, so here I am, in a club in Midtown, and I'm with the offensive line of the New York Jets, and we're putting one on. And he goes, in the next table over, I see this Italian-American guy, and he's sitting with 4 of the hottest girls I've ever seen in my life. And he goes, they're sitting with this guy, and I'm Burt Reynolds. I'm sitting at the next table. And I'm looking over, and they're not looking at me, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I stood up, and I walk over there, and I just start flirting with the ladies. And I'm like, hey, I'm Burt. And they start talking to him. I'm totally ignoring the Italian-American guy. And finally, you know, the Italian-American guy starts to get pissed off. And so he starts chipping at me, and I'm chipping at him. And he goes, you want to fight? And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to fight, right? So they go outside. He goes, it's like a cold winter night in February. And he goes, we're out there on like Midtown, like on 56th Street, and we start like circling each other. And he goes, this Italian guy, he hits me, and he hits me so hard, I was like, who is this, right? And he goes, and we're punching, and he's punching me, and his fist is so hard, and he's hitting me so hard. And after about 2.5 minutes, you know, we finally take a break. And I'm like, this guy, what the hell, right? And
Take a break.
Yeah,
Okay.
he goes, we take a break. And I'm like, Burt says, this guy has earned it. So I say, hey, I'm Burt Reynolds, right? And the guy goes, I'm Mario Andretti, right? And they shook hands. He goes, and that was the beginning of my friendship with, you know, one of the greatest race car drivers in the world.
Burt Reynolds is amazing.
They're
I
the
can't
best.
imagine having to
He's the
direct
best.
him. Yeah.
He's the best.
Did all of those wonderful stories off camera make up for the moments on camera where you could just kind of hold on to those?
I think they did. I mean, he would, you know, we got into it. I mean, he would, every other day he would know his lines perfectly, right? And then the next day he wouldn't know anything. And the next day he'd be perfect. And so I was like, do you want me to come over and run lines for you? He's like, I got it. And eventually, you know, one day we were like, you know, shooting like a race car scene. And so I was going up in a helicopter to shoot aerial footage. And, you know, look, you can't see faces from a helicopter for the most part, right? So as I'm going up in the helicopter, just about to take off, I get a call from the assistant director who says, hey, Burt Reynolds, his back hurts, and he wants to know if he can go for the day. And I'm like, yeah, just put a stand-in the white Boss Hogg suit and tell him to have a good day. So I take off, and I fly around for 3 hours and shooting all these cars flying by, and I see the Burt Reynolds stand-in waving and whatever, doing all this stuff. And so at the end of the day, I come down, and then the next day we're shooting a scene with Burt and Jessica Simpson. Jess is sitting there waiting for Burt. He's not coming out of the trailer. And so then, you know, I'm like, where's Burt? And the assistant director's like, I don't know, where's Burt? And so everyone's on the walkie, where's Burt, where's Burt? And the second assistant director walks up, and he's whispering to the assistant director, and he comes over to me, he goes, Burt won't come out of his trailer. He's pissed off at you. And I said, why? He goes, well, he's pissed that you flew around for 3 hours while he stood on stage, you know, in his white monkey suit. And I'm like, I said he could leave. And the assistant director goes, yeah, I told him he could leave, but then I went and told Joe Don Baker, who was also in the movie, I told him he could leave too, and Joe Don said, I'll stay. So Burt then looked at Joe Don and said, I'll stay too. Trying to be there for his fellow actor, right? Now he's like, he wants to see you, the producer, the assistant director, and the second assistant director in his trailer now. So we walk, this like production assistant leads us, all four of us, over to his trailer, and the production assistant knocks on the door, and the fucking door kicks open, and there's Burt Reynolds, and he's sort of half through hair and makeup because he's got white pants, a white wife beater, he's got the white part here, but he's got his black centerpiece, right? And he's fucking furious. And he goes, get the fuck in here! And we all file in, including the production assistant who just got caught up in the shuffle.
Yay.
Yeah. And so now...
PA's probably had a great story now.
Yeah, I would love to talk to that person. But so we're sitting there, we're standing there in a semicircle around Burt, who's sitting down. And he goes, I directed a couple of pictures in my day, and there's not a lens on Earth that can see a man's face from a helicopter. And I'm like, I know, Burt. I said you could go. He goes, shut the fuck up! And I was like, okay. And then he's going into Jimmy Stewart and Orson Welles and all this fucking shit. And he's like, and then he's spitting mad. Like, he's furious. How many takes are we going to shoot in this goddamn movie? And I'm like, as soon as you get a good one, we'll move on. And he goes, my goddamn back hurts. You know how many stunts I've done on this? And he's like riffing on all sorts of shit, right? And then there's a knock on the door, and he goes, come in. And woman walks in with a little black bag, and he stands up, and he pulls his pants and his underwear down and puts his butt towards us. The woman pulls out a syringe, shoots him up, and then he goes, "Get the fuck out of here!" And then he pulls his pants up, and she leaves. Then he goes into this, like... They say Demerol's as good as Percocet. It isn't. It isn't. I like Percodan, but you gotta take it with a full stomach. And he's just riffing on different pain pills. That went on for a minute. And we're standing there like, is this the greatest moment I've ever lived? I mean, this is my hero chewing me out, now on fucking injections, whatever, because of his back, poor guy. And he's just fucking flying, right? And then he starts to get a grip. You know, he's like, "I saw your movie, Super Duper Pooper Scooper." And he starts going around the room, and he looks at the producer, and he goes, because he knows who butters his bread. He goes, "I like you." And he goes to the first AD is from Texas. He goes, "I like you too." And then he looks at the PA who accidentally brought us in. He goes, "I don't know you." And he looks at me. He goes, "But I don't like you. You want to see a real movie?" And he frisbees a DVD at me, and it hits me in the chest, and I look at it. And he goes, "Now get the fuck out of here." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm really sorry." But he goes, "Get the fuck out." And so we leave, and I'm like, "Now what?" Right? And my producer's like, What did he give you?" And I looked at the DVD, and it says, "Burt Reynolds, Why My Back Hurts." And I'm like, let's go watch it, right? So we go in my trailer, and four of us, we all sit and watch the thing. And it's every stunt he's ever done set to classical music. Like he's leaping off buildings, grabbing onto a tree. The branch breaks, he slams to the ground, smashing cars and Smokey the Bandit, running with the football and longest yard getting drilled, fights, rolling down hills. And at the end of it, you're like, we were all just smiling. And you're like, what a fucking badass this guy is. I mean, you just love him even more. Like, he's such a tough guy. And, you know, then he comes out, and he does the scene. He knows every line, and he drills it. Doesn't mention it. We don't even say a word about this unbelievably bizarre thing that just happened. And we have one more week. Every day he knows his lines. Every day he knows his lines. Until the very last day, he messed up one line, and then he goes, "Fuck, goddamn stupid Indian." And he goes, "Not you, me, I'm 1/4 Cherokee, the other kind of Indian, not you."
So he really just wanted to have like a moment with you guys in the trailer, like a private moment.
Yeah, and then
That's so crazy. That's him. It was him being like really vulnerable with you.
Yes, and then at the end of the movie, we're all hugging goodbye, and he hugs me so tight, and he goes, puts his lips right by my ear, he goes, "Will you ever forgive me? Will you ever forgive me?"
So dramatic. It's like,
it was like I was in Deliverance. I was like, yes.
Such like an old
will
school
forgive you.
tough guy actor who at the same time is like super vulnerable and dramatic.
I love Burt Reynolds. I love him.
Love that story, man. Let's get some questions from the audience. Right here.
Jay, thanks so much for being here, man. This really has been magical. I grew up in Vermont. Super Troopers was like a big part of our culture, and I think I speak for everyone. We're very excited about Super Troopers 2, and I just want to know what you could tell us about that.
The film is cut, and we've tested it, and the good news is, you know, we're not going to be embarrassed. It turned out, you know, it turned out well. And the crowds that have been coming, are, you know, we've showed it for about 500 people in California. And the response has been, you know, I think some of it is, for whatever reason, that film became a film that people watched with their buddies and smoked joints and watched it a couple times and memorized, whatever it is, right? That movie just caught on in a way that we didn't know it would. And so there was a lot of pressure on the movie because we didn't want to like make the shitty sequel, right? And people go, maybe that first one wasn't that good either, right? I mean, it was a lot of pressure. So we tried to make just another one, you know, just make another one. You know, it's a little bigger. The mustaches are definitely bigger. You know, I mean, we were shooting it, and the cameraman was like bumping into it. I'm like, just back up a little. This thing's a lot bigger than you think it is. And there are a lot of, we're better at structure, so I think the stories, I mean, whatever. I'm not going to critique the first one, right? But the point is, it turned out well. We cut it. My friends are in this band called the Eagles of Death Metal, and they are, I've been to their shows, and I'm like, this is the musical version of us. And so I asked them to score the movie, and so now they're scoring the film. And it's going to come out sometime in the next, 6 months.
Next question.
Hey, Jay. I love Super Troopers and Beer Fest.
Thanks.
I was wondering, I read that you were studying history and philosophy in college. How did you go into comedy and like writing and directing?
Yeah, I mean, I was an actor in high school and college, and I always, I thought about making a career in show business, but the theater has race-blind casting, right? But films, you kind of need a physical type for films. I mean, that's just how it kind of the medium works. And at the time, there were no Indians working in show business, in American show business, right? There was like, if you needed an Indian, you got a guy like Peter Sellers and put him in brownface in the movie The Party. By the way, great fucking movie. His performance is fucking great, right? Or they got Fisher Stevens to play an Indian. They put him in brownface, and he was in the movie Short Circuit 2, a movie my dad said was one of his favorite movies. And I said, why? He goes, because there's an Indian in it. And I said, that's not a real Indian. And he goes, it's as close as we'll get. And I was like, no, we're going to do better than that. But really, there was no hope of really making it that way. Like, I was going to have to play the deli guy or the cab driver, and I was like, after going from being the lead in plays to doing that, I'm like, I don't think that's going to work. So I decided to kind of make a run at it in comedy. Like, maybe I could get on Saturday Night Live or something, who knows? But I said, I'll only do it if I can make strangers laugh. Like doing plays at school is great, and my friends would come and they'd laugh, but you're like, you need to make strangers laugh to make money in this business, right? So I went to Chicago, and I got involved in the Improv Olympic there. At the time, Chris Farley was he was at the top of the level, and I was at the bottom. And I got into an improv group, and when he did his shows, they were like wall-to-wall laughs. When we did our shows, it was like grinding silence, like boredom. The audience was suffering. I felt bad for them. And they were not laughing. And I was like, okay, this is not working. If I can't make them laugh, I'm not doing this. And then I said, okay, so I'm going to write stand-up. And so I wrote like 10 minutes of stand-up, and I signed up for an open mic, and I went, and I did my 10 minutes, and I raced through it in 5 minutes. I mean, I just ran through the fucking jokes. But I got laughs from strangers, and I was like, okay. And I did stand up another 20 times after that, and kept doing this awful improv, which really was awful. And then awful because we weren't good at it, And then I went back to Colgate, and I was bragging about how I was in real show business in Chicago, and I was bragging about how I was in an improv group. We were so good, and just totally full of shit. And this guy who had started a comedy group, he had started a theater group, and he had cast me in a play before. And in the theater group, it was like an all-student-run theater group, right? So he was like the new guy with the new theater group. But then he had to go to London to study for a semester, and he wanted his theater group to keep going. So he asked 3 people to do one-act plays, and then he called me up, and he said, hey, do you want to do that improv group you're always talking about? You could do it here. Do as one of the one-acts. And I was like, yeah, okay, I might do that. And so I called my friend Kevin Heffernan, who played Farva in the movies, and I said, do you want to do an improv group? We'll put on a show. And he goes, I'm not going to be putting on any shows. No, I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, fuck it. So I called the guy, and I'm like, we're not doing it. And he goes, what? Come on, you got to do it. I'm like, no, we're not going to fucking do that. We're not going to do that. So then over the summer, we went to a Grateful Dead show, and we dropped acid, and I was like, kind of back at my house, and I'm kind of like a little jelly-headed. And the phone rings, and it's this guy again. He goes, dude, I got 3 one-act plays set. I need you to do that improv thing. And I'm like, all right, I'll call you back. So I call my friend Kevin Heffernan, and I'm like, buddy, let's do a show. We're going to do a show. And he goes, what are you talking about? The last thing he had ever acted in was in 3rd grade in Captain Hook. And he's like, I'm not doing a show. What? There's no show. I'm not doing it. And I'm like, all right, you're right, fine, fuck it. So I call the guy, I'm like, we're not doing it. In the fall, we're back at Colgate, and now we're like just smoking grass every night, and we're drinking, and we're having a ball, senior year. And I get a call on the payphone, and it's this guy from London. He goes, you're doing the show, I don't care, you're doing the show, I need a fourth, you're doing the show, that's it. And I'm like, fine, fuck it, fine. So I hung up, and I go up to Kevin's room, we were in the same house, and I'm like, we're doing a show, it's a done deal, we're doing the goddamn show. He's like, oh, fine, fuck you, fine, we'll do it. And that's how we got it. That's how we did it, because it was just this, like, we were made to do it. You know, he didn't want me to go do a show and miss out. He was intrigued by Chris Farley. He was intrigued by the comedy thing, because he was a really funny guy. And he's like, he didn't like the idea that I would go do the show without him, which now I was going to do. And so he's like, fine, I'll do it. And so then we started. We called all the funniest people we knew on campus and wrote us, Actually, we tried to do improv, and it was so bad and so awful that we just switched to sketch, because I'm like, we can write history papers, we can probably write sketches. And that's how we, and we did a show, and it became, 40 people showed up the first night and 350 the next night, and then we were sold out, and we became a big hit there.
Next question. Right here, I think this is our last one.
Hi, Jay. How you doing today?
Thanks.
Thanks for coming here. I'm a huge Puddle Cruisers fan, so that movie just connected with me. We know that a movie of that caliber can be made for such a low budget. Coming up and doing the fundraising, the crowdfunding for Super Troopers 2, you're making it for the fans, for us. We really appreciate you taking your time and doing it the way that you wanted to make this movie. Now, I know you only got to a certain amount. I think it was $5 million. Do you think if you had more money, you could have done more with the movie, or?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, we made the movie that we really wrote. We wrote the movie, and we made it the way we wanted to. Because we took the $5 million, which was an immense amount of money.
The first one was like 1.2,
1.2.
Right?
And then we raised even some more money after that on top of the 5. So the movie you see is the movie we would have made if we had had 30. That's the movie. What we did differently, on a $30 million movie, you would shoot it over, let's say, 35, 36, 37 days. This one we shot in 27 days. Interestingly, one less than the original. But we're way better filmmakers. So we're literally I just shot the shots that I needed versus shooting all these other shots and wasting all this other time. I need this shot and this shot and this shot and this shot. And we just put it together in a more economical way. Like Dukes of Hazzard, I had 75 days, right? This one, 27, but it tested better than the Dukes of Hazzard did, which tested, pretty high. So
I have one more question before I let you go. One thing that you talk about in the book is the being on the set of The Color of Money, your first movie that you're on the set of, and seeing the important conversation that happens in the middle of the set. Now that you've been a part of that important conversation on all the films that you've made and all the TV shows that you've directed, does it still feel as sort of sacred or as, sort of as beautiful as you?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was in high school, I was 18, and our acting teacher said there's an opportunity to be an extra in a film in Chicago, and we're like, okay, can we get out of school? Great. So we went down to Chicago to Navy Pier. There were about 2,000 people there, and there were all these pool tables, and the movie was The Color of Money.
Criminally underrated Martin Scorsese.
Yeah. And I didn't really know who Scorsese was. I was like, okay. But I saw Paul Newman and Tom Cruise and Martin Scorsese, and they're all in the middle of the set, and they're just laughing it up and cracking jokes and pointing and doing shots. And I was like, I remember looking at that conversation and saying, I want to be in that conversation. Whatever they're talking about, I don't know what's going on here, but I need to be in that conversation. And now I'm in it. Now I get to walk up to Rob Lowe and Fred Savage and and I'm like, here's what we're gonna do. And we crack jokes, and I'm like, I'm always aware, like the 17-year-old me is well aware of how awesome it is to be right in the middle there.
That's so awesome. The book, Mustache Shenanigans, Making Super Troopers and Other Adventures in Comedy, it's on shelves now, right?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
But you can pre-order it.
You could pre-order it.
And if you're in Chicago, tomorrow night I'm at the Music Box Theater, and you can come, and there'll be another interview with totally different stories than this, I promise. And I'll sign your book, and I'll take a picture with you, and Music Box Theater tomorrow night.
All right, Jay, thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mustache Shenanigans, everybody.